All right, so here we are starting off on chapter 10, which is going to talk about the market revolution, or as the chapter I think calls it, America's economic revolution. Some people refer to it as the Industrial Revolution, so it's kind of complicated. Um, so there's kind of two industrial revolutions that happened during the 1800s. Um, and there's the first industrial revolution that happens during the first third of the 19th century. So we'll say 1800 to about 1835, 40. And then there's the second industrial revolution, which is about roughly 1870, 1875 to 1900. In the first industrial revolution, while it does have some impacts in the United States, it's largely its biggest impact is in Europe. And then the second industrial revolution, which we focus on in chapter 17, is primarily taking place in the United States. It's the second industrial revolution that makes the United States kind of what it is today. The world helps make it the industrial power it is today. But it begins a little bit during this first industrial revolution. In the United States, we tend to call it the market revolution to differentiate between the first and second industrial revolution. So this in the United States is the market revolution. And in this chapter, we're going to focus on really both some economic and social impacts of the market growth and market changes that occur over this time. So where are we historically? Right now, we're in the year roughly, we'll say about 1830. Okay, so same time frame as Andrew Jackson, but we're talking about some different things. We're talking about some economic and social factors here in chapter 10. And we're going to take this chapter really to about 1850. So this is where kind of this market revolution era takes place. The packet will be due on Monday, and the quiz for chapter 10 will be due Monday as well. So be ready for that. I think it'll take us about 3 days to get through this chapter, and then the quiz will be Monday. That's where we are. So how did we get to this point? Kind of quick review, revolution, building the nation up. Here we are in the 1830s, having gone through the Panic of 1819, having gone through some political changes in the 1820s, the emergence of the second party system with the Whigs and the Democrats, and now into the 1830s and 40s, some economic upheaval with the Panic of 1837, as well as some social changes too, as we get our first new wave of immigrants coming into this country during this time. So that'll be something that we talk about here too. So let's just go ahead and move on. All right, so the growth of America from 1790 to 1850. Again, that's just kind of an old picture in the background of immigrants arriving in America kind of during this first big wave of immigration. Okay, so what we see beginning in about the 1830s is really 1820s and 30s is really exploding population in the United States. Population is on the rise as America is a desirable location to go to. People are coming here for the same reason they came here when we were British colonies. Opportunity. In European nations, you have an established aristocracy or monarchy or whatever. You have your wealthy people, and frankly, it's hard to break into that group. Okay, but in America, you don't really have as much of an established aristocracy. Do we have an aristocracy? Yeah, you have rich, influential people, influential families. The Biddles, Nicholas Biddle's family was a powerful, influential one in America at this time. You have the Adams, John Adams and John Quincy Adams. That family is certainly a powerful political family. You have the Astors, who were a very wealthy family that made a ton of money in the fur trade. And later opium trade, actually. So you do have some aristocracy in America, but there's also lots of opportunity for people to, make a living for themselves, make wealth for themselves, become very, very successful and influential. And we see this happen with a lot of people who come to America during this time, during the market revolution, the Vanderbilts, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers of the world, and they come around and become incredibly powerful during the second industrial revolution, become some of the richest Americans ever. So we see a place where people want to come to, where opportunity exists. America is this land of plenty and land of opportunity for anybody that wants to take the dangerous trip across the ocean to seek wealth and opportunity. We're also seeing very large American families during this time, right? American families are still very large. They're averaging about 6 children apiece. There's lots of cheap land available, and people of modest to average financial means are able to get land. People with more means can get more land. People with modest means can at least get some land, can go out and get an acre or two and plant a farm and make a little money and get by that way. So America is a country that anybody can have a chance to get ahead, right? If you put your shoes on and you tie your shoes and you go to work and you strap your boots or whatever you want to call it, if people are willing to work to get ahead in America, they can get ahead. And that's just not necessarily the case to a lot of people in Europe. So they come here to make a better life. And we still see these large families, which is very much an effect of the Puritan lifestyle, the really religiously based lifestyle that is still a deep part of the culture, especially in New England. And this is where all the big cities are. So when those boats of people are coming over from Europe, they're landing in places like Philadelphia, New York, and Boston, helping grow the population of those cities and turning them into industrial centers, which is a really important point as well. And they come there, they get part of the culture, which especially in New England, where family is important. You get married, you start having children, and 5, 6 kids are typical of American families during this time. So let's talk a little bit about the growth of immigrants. So approximately 3 million Irish and German immigrants land in America after about 1840. And they do have some similarities and differences. Okay, so the immigration wave that happens in the 1840s, 1830s and 40s really, comes primarily from Germany and Ireland, and we'll get into those two here in a second. So they come primarily from Germany and Ireland, where later on, at the big influx of immigrants late in the 19th century, probably where a lot of your families when they arrived here, they're coming from Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, Italy, places like that. So it's a very different group of people that are coming in here. Okay, so Irish and Germans, apart from the land of their birth, they're different in 2 basic ways, actually 3 basic ways. Number one is the Irish, of course, are predominantly Catholic, which is going to be an important point because we in America don't really like Catholics. And then Germans, who tend to be more Protestant. Lutheranism is big there. So religiously, they're a little bit different as well. And this will be okay for the Germans. We're not too fond of Catholics in America at this time. So anyway. So the Irish coming here tend to be very, very poor people. They're fleeing the Irish potato famine, which is a major problem in Ireland. They're very Catholic. And of course, like I said before, they're coming to a country that is very prejudiced against Catholics. Okay? The Irish potato famine decimates the population and is horrible for the Irish. And with them being very poor, there's little opportunity for them. The British, who kind of control Ireland at this point, they don't really do much to help them. The Irish are kind of looked at, as the poor stepchild of the British, kind of like the trash of the British. So they're not well taken care of. And they flee Ireland because there's nothing good going on there, and they come to America looking for opportunity. Of course, with them being very poor, they're in a difficult spot. They have no money, they have very few skills, so the only place they can go is America's city. So we start to see the big city populations become dominated by Irish and Irish Catholics, particularly places like Boston, New York, and obviously Philadelphia, but in particular in Boston. So that's where they end up. They get jobs in they get low-paying jobs in the factories, the textile mills, whatever they can do to try to eke by here in America. Another big job they get eventually is going to be building railroads and building canals, because that's also hard work that a lot of people don't want to do. The Germans, by contrast, are a little bit more middle class, the ones that come here. Basically, they're leaving Germany because there's lots of political unrest there, and they kind of see that, if you're a middle class person in Germany and you don't really have much influence or power, you have enough money to try to get away, so you might as well try to get away. So a lot of Germans come over. They're trying to get away from political unrest in Germany. As a consequence of that, they come here with some money and some skills. Okay, so you sell your home in Germany, you hop on the boat, you come on over, you have a little bit of money. So you have enough money, you can gather your things and your family, you hop on the train and move a little bit further out west and make life as a farmer. Okay, that's generally what they do. They settle in places primarily Ohio, lots of areas in Ohio. Cincinnati has a big German population. Cleveland, Detroit, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, St. Louis, Missouri gets a lot of them. Chicago, kind of. So we see a lot of German Indianapolis, you see a lot of German population really in the Midwest, people of German background. I'm German in background. Obviously not far from here in Dayton, you have Germantown. As you would probably imagine, it was a town settled by German immigrants that came over, during the 1840s, leaving Germany to look for a better life here. They come to America, they have money to buy land, they get a farm, and they, either thrive in doing that and become wealthier or become wealthy, or, they continue to live a middle-class lifestyle, which they're content with. So there's a difference between the two groups. Looking at a chart of population growth, which unfortunately did not come out the way it was supposed to. Sorry about that. So 1790 is right here, 1800, 1810, 1820, 30, 40, 50, 60. But if you look at the chart, if you're looking at the total population and the total population growth, so I'll try to explain this for you as best I can. This number in the last one is going to be around, by 1860, is going to be around 32,000 people, about 30,000, or I'm sorry, 31 million people by this time. But the total population is represented by the blue, and the growth in population here is represented by the green. So you note in 1790 it's smaller, but with each subsequent decade we're getting greater percentages of immigrants coming into this country, up to about 1850 here, where you get the biggest jump, almost 5 million immigrants coming in the 1850s. You see that number go down a little bit, when you hit 1850, 1860, because why? So I want you to send me, why do you think in this last one here we start to see, so this is 1850 to 1860. So I'm sure that you watched this. I want you to answer this question. Why do you think from 1850 to 1860 we see a dip in the number of immigrants that come into this country? What could be going on in America during this time that is going to lead to fewer immigrants coming in? Okay, so send me an answer, what you think the answer is to that question, and from there we'll move on. So, all right. So an interesting thing starts to develop as these immigrants make their way into the United States. And we get the birth of an ideology known as nativism. Nativism still exists today. Nativism is the idea of that people are generally hostile towards foreign-born people. The idea of nativism is that people born in another country that immigrate here are somehow inferior to the Americans who have been here for a while. They don't understand the culture, the language, things like that. Nativism is a component of things that we hear about in the news a lot today, such as like white nationalism, certainly white supremacy, and a lot of those ideologies. So it's really nothing new, right? Nativism is the result of people being scared of change or scared of our culture being negatively impacted by other people coming in. What we forget is we're all natives we're all immigrants at some point. Each and every person in a class arrived here at some point. Unless you're a Native American, unless you are a full-blooded Native American, you're an immigrant one way or another, right? You can go back a few generations in your family and find out that they're immigrants. I know that I am a fifth-generation American, I believe, on my father's side, and a third-generation American on my mother's side. My great-grandparents on my mother's side immigrated to the United States early in the 20th century, like around 1910, around there. On my father's side, I believe my great-great, so I'm a fourth generation on that side. My great-great-grandparents came over from England and Germany in like the 1880s. Okay, so we're all immigrants to one degree or another. But nativism is this concept that we're just very hostile towards people that were born in other places. This gives birth to the concept of WASPs or WASPism. And what WASP stands for is White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. We hear WASP often associated with groups like the Ku Klux Klan, because basically the Klan is essentially against anybody who is not a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. In other words, somebody white from England. These people don't like Catholics. They don't like people from minority race groups. They don't like anybody who didn't come from here. So nativism is born during this time, and it comes and goes with different generations. It exists for a while here in the 1840s and 50s, and then we get the Civil War, so it kind of backs off for a while, but then it comes back. It always comes back in one form or another. We see a lot of it today with people coming in from Central America, Mexico, Middle Easterners. Nativism always comes and goes in one form or another, depending on how the subject is dealt with by the people and the leaders in the country. Okay, and obviously, with the wall and all that other stuff, we see a lot more talk of nativism and those ideas today. Now, America is still very much a British culture. Now, we've been our own country now. If it's 1830, 1840, we've been our own country really now since the end of the war. So we'll say 1880 to 1780 to 1830, 1840. So we've been our own country really for 50 to 60 years. So that's about 2 generations worth of people who can say, we're Americans. We've always been Americans. So our culture, the things we're interested in, the things we enjoy, are still very much the same things that the British enjoyed, because that was our dominant culture here in America. So we're still developing what makes us unique and what makes us our own culture. And that perhaps is part of the reason why there's a lot of hostility and nativism towards these people coming in. And I kind of already talked about why they don't like immigrants. They're going to ruin the culture, so on and so forth. Basically, we can break down why they don't like immigrants to kind of 3 reasons. First is the economic reason. Okay, immigrants are going to come in here poor. They're going to cost society more money than it's worth, and taxes, and the government taking care of people and that sort of thing. So, bottom line, poor immigrants cost society more money than they're worth. They're bad for that reason. Poor immigrants cost society more money than they're worth. There's the social reason. If we let more foreigners in, they're going to ruin the culture. They're going to ruin the American culture. This was the argument in the 1830s and 40s. So socially, they're going to come in, they're going to ruin the culture by doing their own cultural practices. We don't want that, even though we really haven't defined a culture of our own that's uniquely American. And then finally, you have the political reason. Politicians are going to take advantage of clueless immigrants to gain power. Okay? These people, are going to be taken advantage of. So these three reasons are very much the same reasons we hear today, the same reasons that people have today for where nativist feelings that exist today. The same arguments that you hear in the 1840s are the same ones you hear today about immigrants, right? People that don't want a lot of immigrants, they say, oh, they cost the government too much because of taxes and welfare and all that other stuff. The social reason, oh, they're going to ruin our culture in America. The political reason, oh, people are going to come in, they're going to take advantage of them. You hear now the Democrats are going to get them all on their side and give them the votes and stuff like that. Again, it tells you that as much as this country changes, it really doesn't change all that much in some really important social and political ways. Okay? So the last thing we're going to talk about today is what results from this growth of nativism. And that's going to be a new political ideology and party that gains a pretty strong deal of power during the 1840s and 50s called the Know Nothing Party. What it's actually called is called the American Party, and this is what you would call a nativist or nationalist political party. Anti-immigrant, pro-American, that sort of thing. Sounds, again, a little bit familiar to the way a lot of people maybe feel nowadays. Okay? Now, the reason they call them the Know-Nothings is when this party would get together and when they would meet, there was a code word that you were supposed to say to get into the meetings, and the code word was, I don't know nothing. And the party just kind of became known as the Know Nothing Party. And they actually get a great deal of support. So much so that they win, several seats in local government, some seats in Congress. They even put forth, who was it? They even put forth Martin Van Buren, the former president Martin Van Buren, in 1848, I think. They put Martin Van Buren forth as a third party candidate for president. So they gained a great deal of influence and power for about a decade and a half in the 1840s and into the 1850s. Seats in Congress, like I said, they put forth a presidential candidate. So they're actually pretty significant. And as immigration continues to grow, so does their hostility towards immigrants coming into this country. Okay? What kind of puts an end to the Know Nothing Party is by the middle of the 1850s, as the Civil War is becoming more apparent or more imminent, the Know Nothing Party kind of falls out of favor. The remnants of the Know Nothings probably end up with the newly formed Republican Party, but that's a story for another time. So I believe that's everything for today. That went on a bit longer than I thought it would. I'll have another video for you tomorrow where we're going to talk about canals and transportation. Again, if any of this didn't make sense, please shoot me an email and we will get it all straightened out. All right, so thanks a lot, and I will see you later.